Welcome back. So now, here's our problem with factoring. The Gcf rule doesn't always work. Not every polynomial expression has something in common you could divide out of all the terms. Therefore, we have other rules. Today's rule of factoring is called grouping. So let's talk about this. Look at your notes at my expression. A cubed plus 3a squared plus 4a plus 12. I have 4 terms, 4 monomials. If I ask you to factor doing GCF, I'm asking you, find out what all 4 terms have in common and divide it out. Well, do all 4 terms have a number in common? Well, the only number you can divide 1, 3, 4, and 12 by is 1. Do they all have a variable in common? Well, the first 3 terms have an a, but the last term, 12, does not. So you cannot say you could divide them by a. So the only GCF here we have is 1. Now, the problem with the GCF being 1 is it doesn't do anything. If you divide all those terms by 1, they're going to stay the same. So having a GCF of 1 is not a way to factor. So the GCF rule doesn't work. Now, if your polynomial expression has 4 terms, the rule of factoring you're going to always use is called grouping. I call grouping Noah's Ark. And the reason why I relate it to Noah's Ark is because if you think about the story of Noah bringing the animals on the boat, the animals came 2 by 2. And that's what we're about to do. Grouping means to group the terms. And you're going to group them like the animals, 2 by 2. The first 2 and the last 2. And the way we show we're grouping terms together is we use our famous symbol, parentheses. So we're going to take this polynomial, a cubed plus 3a squared plus 4a plus 12, and regroup it into 2 sets of parentheses. So we're physically just going to throw parentheses around the first 2 terms and around the last 2 terms. So if you look in your notes, I have grouped a cubed plus 3a squared, the first 2 terms. And then I have the last 2 terms, positive 4a plus 12. Now be careful. A lot of people forget to put the positive with the 4 and put it in parentheses. Remember, if a sign is in front of a number, it belongs with that. So I need to see 2 sets of parentheses with all the terms grouped. Now what that does is it then narrows down how to factor. Instead of looking at all 4 terms and seeing what all 4 have in common, which was nothing, we're going to look at just the first 2 terms and say, what do they have in common? So if you look at a cubed and 3a squared, they have something in common you could divide out, that you could factor out. And it's a squared. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do the GCF rule with just the first 2 terms. So we pull out the a squared, and that's going to leave us with a plus 3. Now, if you do it to the first 2 terms, you're going to do the same process to the last 2 terms. In the other set of parentheses, we have positive 4a plus 12. Well, what do those 2 terms have in common? Well, they don't have an a squared in common, but they both have a 4 in common. We can divide both of those terms by 4. So we're going to pull out the 4, and that's going to leave us also with an a plus 3. So when we do grouping, this should make so much sense. We're taking 4 terms that have nothing in common, and we're grouping them 2 by 2, making smaller groups. And we're looking at this first group to see what they have in common, pulling out that GCF, seeing what's left. We're taking the other group, pulling out their GCF, seeing what's left. Now you'll know you're doing this correctly because look very closely when we factored it. Now we have a squared, a plus 3 in parentheses, plus 4, a plus 3 in parentheses. Look very closely at those parentheses. What do you notice? They're the same. When you do grouping, if those parentheses are not the same, then you screwed up. You did it wrong. When you do grouping, what's left in the parentheses should be the same, which means now that's what they have in common. So we're going to write that a plus 3 because that's what they both terms have in common. And what that leaves us with is the a squared plus 4. And that goes in our other set of parentheses. So if you look, a plus 3 times a squared plus 4 is our factored expression. And it's factored because it's connected by multiplication. So by doing grouping, you did the GCF rule really 3 times. You grouped the first 2 terms, pulled out their GCF, told me what's left in parentheses. You took the last two terms, pulled out their GCF, told me what's left in the parentheses. The parentheses should always be identical. Now that's the GCF, what they have in common. You pull that out, and what's left was on the outside, the a squared plus 4. Now you'll know you're correct because you can multiply that. Recall, how do you multiply a binomial times a binomial? That's right, you do the FOIL method, first, outer, inner, last. So let's try it. First, what's a times a squared? A cubed. Outers, what's a times positive 4? Positive 4a. Inners, what's positive 3 times a squared? Positive 3a squared. Last, what's positive 3 times positive 4? Positive 12. Are you back to the same 4 original terms? You sure are. So all grouping is a fancy way to do the GCF rule 3 times. You'll know you're doing grouping. You'll always have 4 terms. All right, let's try some on the whiteboard. I'll see you in the next video.